Welcome to the Runway, where we cover current events in crypto, Web3, and tech. It's Wednesday, May 29th. Let's take off. All right, guys, first up, Mount Gox transfers 9 billion Bitcoin to single address as part of repayment plans. Nearly 107,000 Bitcoin have been moved since early Asian hours on Tuesday, with Bitcoin shedding 1.2% on expectations of selling pressure. The beautiful part about the blockchain is that you can see these things happening in real time, which is really freaking cool. You know, you can actually see when a large on-chain event or when there could potentially be distributions or sell pressure. There were 13 total transactions, and you can watch this 107,000 Bitcoin flow into this actual wallet where that Mount Gox is going to use to distribute to all of the claimants for the their bankruptcy claim from, God, it's got to have been about almost a decade since that happened. Next up, Coin Mania sees Cardano knocked out of the top 10 crypto rankings. The reason I highlighted this article, I don't usually like to talk about, just meme coins in general, but it just shows the staying power that some of these coins have and how much people love their dogs and the communities that are built around stuff like Dogecoin and this new Shiba Inu. This new coin Shiba Inu over the past cycle. It's pretty powerful. Memes are just extremely powerful political tools. And I think that, throughout human history, it's been that way, right? Even when it was, Martin Luther, people putting up memes and pictures and comics even, right? To send messages and to demonstrate ideas. This one is kind of interesting about meme coins. It says ChatGPT-coded meme coin reaches $638 million market cap. And this is actually kind of a interesting, funny story. Looks like this guy, Rhett here, he said, I gave GPT-4 a budget of $69 and asked it to make the greatest meme coin. I will follow all instructions it gives me and document the process here. So while Mankind initially described the project as a joke, the Turbo creator said on X that he would follow through. Mankind continued to give the AI chatbot instructions to reach the goal of being a top 300 token on CoinGecko. Kind of wild here. It's crazy how much capital people put into these things, right? But I think it's an extension of people like the memes, and they also like people like to gamble and speculate, right? And I don't think no matter what you do in any market, there's always going to be speculation and there's always going to be gambling, and people just enjoy that's part of life. People enjoy the sweat. They enjoy having fun. So good luck stopping human nature and people from doing what they want. Next up, former FTX executive Ryan Salami sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Salami's lawyers had asked for 18 months. These are the sentences that are fair and reasonable in my mind. These are nonviolent crimes, and I think that 7.5 years, which, if you have good behavior, you can get out early. I think these are a punishment that's warranted for these crimes of, defrauding all these investors. Here's a story that we talked about a little while ago, and I think it's moving along here. Fetch.AI, SingularityNET, Ocean Protocol set date for Artificial Superintelligence Alliance token merger. The three AI platforms will complete the token merger on June 13th, and FET will be renamed ASI 2 days before. So interesting combination of, instead of a fork, you have a coming together of three different projects, and they are all going to combine their teams and launch under a combined token. So it'll be a cool story to follow and watch. And I'm going to keep shining attention on this one, guys, because this just really pisses me off. And this is the U.S. response to Binance exec Tigran Gambaryan's detention is shameful. A mid-tier employee of the crypto exchange and U.S. citizen is being wrongfully detained in Nigeria. Former DOJ national security expert Andrew C. Adams argues. We haven't heard much in the news. He worked for the government, used the blockchain to track down and follow the trail of these pedophiles, and had probably the biggest bust in the history of the world. And they tracked people all over the world. They worked with agencies all over the world. And here he is being extorted in Nigeria. In late February of this year, 2 Binance employees were detained by Nigerian officials without notice or a public announcement of charges. In the weeks that followed, Nigerian prosecutors charged the two with money laundering and tax offenses that are entirely divorced from the personal conduct of either man. One of those Binance employees, Tigran Gambaryan, was in fact the company's lead law enforcement liaison, a former IRS criminal investigator and global educator on the use of blockchain technology for identifying and combating precisely the kind of offenses that he is now unjustly facing in Nigerian court. I mean, you cannot make this up. This would be the equivalent of, like, you flying somewhere and you flip burgers at McDonald's, and, I guess McDonald's had foul meat or something that, people got sick from, and you land in some country and they arrest you because just because you worked there, they arrest you and charge you with the meat offenses, right? This is the same situation here. It's just ridiculous, right? They're just arresting random people, especially a great actor and a good actor like Tigran here. Share this, get the word out, because this is bullshit, and he needs to come home. Let's move along here. Pierre Richard, mining Bitcoin with biomass waste could pay for emission control systems and improve air quality. So it's something we talk about a lot on this podcast, is the ability to monetize landfill sites or natural gas pipeline leaks, or, use methane to have a clean burn and use that energy to mine Bitcoin, right? So here we see tons of fires in the state of California. One way we can stop that problem and take advantage of all this biomass waste is by using it is monetizing that waste in the use of Bitcoin mining, right? And then you could take the revenue from that and you could take a percentage of that to pay for emission control systems and help improve air quality. So interesting synergies that exist here. Bitcoin miners who work with electrical companies to co-locate their stuff at different green energy sites can work with them to monetize those green energy investments quicker, right? So instead of a 20-year ROI, they can turn it into a 5-year ROI by consuming all of the energy that's produced at those locations. The same thing, there's so much potential here for Bitcoin mining to capture things that normally wouldn't be monetizable by any other industry, right? Bitcoin mining is a unique industry in the sense that it can monetize all of these niche waste products or niche gas leaks, or responsible to demand response when there's an emergency on the grid, or locating in the middle of nowhere next to a solar farm or a wind farm. It's just a very unique opportunity. So we will continue to highlight that on this podcast when it's warranted. Just in, BlackRock's spot Bitcoin ETF, IBIT, passes GBTC to become the largest Bitcoin ETF in the world. We all knew this was inevitable. GBTC has been bleeding capital because they have the highest fee in the industry, but since they had the first mover advantage, they were going to continue to capitalize on that fee. And then you see IBIT slowly gaining over time. And finally, it has surpassed Grayscale Bitcoin Trust as the largest ETF in the world. Next up, Justin, MasterCard launches crypto credential, allowing users to send and receive crypto using a username instead of a wallet address. So most of humanity is used to using username, and the wallet address is something that's a long number of letters and numbers that sits underneath that. And now they're combining the two, where the wallet address, it looks like, will sit underneath the username. So you can just send a username. I know Ethereum was doing this with ENS. People are buying .ENS names, which sit inside of a wallet. And then if you send to that ENS name, it will go to that address, right? So this is interesting. And we're going to continue to see more and more of this, more of the technical stuff of blockchains obfuscated and underneath the hood of the simple UI and UX that people expect when they operate and use modern day products and services. It's nice to see, and you're going to continue to see more and more of these large companies, work with blockchains and work with crypto and work with Web3 companies and work with Web3 projects, right? So you're going to see more and more of this, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Pedro Domingos. I saw this post the other day. I was thinking about it. I said, what is going on here, right? So he is a professor of computer science at UW and author of The Master Algorithm in 2040. Haven't read any of his stuff yet, but this post I just had to kind of take a look at here, and it made me laugh. Your brain consumes 20 watts of power. A single GPU consumes a kilowatt, which is 1,000 watts of power, is what he's claiming here. A data center has tens of thousands of them and is still not as powerful as your brain. Chew on that before you say AGI is imminent. So I will say that a single GPU does not consume 1,000 watts. That's a gross over exaggeration, although the higher end ones consume 300, 400, 500 and the data center ones maybe a little bit more, 500, 600, but this is a little bit of an exaggeration. Your consumer grade GPUs will be within the 150 to from the 100 range to the 400 watt range, and it'll vary in there. If you're using it on heavy demand, it might be closer to 300, 350 watts, but if you're barely using it at all, just browsing on the web, it'll only use maybe 100, 120 watts or less. And also, he's got a false equivalence here. He's kind of comparing apples to oranges, right? So someone here says, this is like saying cars aren't good forms of transport because they take 31K calories to travel 20 miles, but a human only takes 2K, right? So it's a question of how fast you want to get there. There are so many other factors that are important to consider. Right, but yes, we're not quite there yet. GPU infrastructure is really in architecture is the human brain has had billions of years, hundreds of millions of years formed through evolution to get to the point of where we are today. And these GPUs, these chip fabs have only been here for a couple decades, right? So we're not quite there yet. But I just wanted to highlight that. But it is also interesting to think about how much more efficient your human brain, the biological system is, and how much less energy it uses. All those billions of neurons in your brain and those connections use compared to a GPU, which uses hundreds of watts more to run. Shows you how early we still are technologically. Just in, healthcare company Semler Scientific buys 581 Bitcoin with worth $40 million. The company has also adopted Bitcoin as its primary treasury reserve asset. So this is the first of many dominoes, I think, to fall here. Mark says the MSTR game theory is playing out as predicted. Just recently, April 8th, Metaplanet announced its MSTR copycat Bitcoin acquisition strategy. Square announced it will put 10% of its Bitcoin gross profit into Bitcoin with mostly purchases. Today, Semler Scientific announced that it has adopted Bitcoin as its primary treasury reserve asset. Game theory suggests that all companies will have to adopt the Bitcoin standard or they will lose to a company that does. I think this is great game theory, great logic, and I think you're going to continue to see this play out in real time as time goes on. Thomas Massey, Trump on Tim Pool's podcast recently, and he was talking about giving very serious consideration to pardoning Julian Assange. Should Assange be pardoned? And of course, many of you who follow this podcast and who are part of the Web3 and the crypto ethos, the cypherpunk ethos, you will agree that yes, Assange should absolutely be pardoned or take away all these charges against him for using his First Amendment rights of free speech, for sharing corruption and things that have happened all over the world, including by our very own government. Same thing here with Edward Snowden. The Fourth Amendment is, our right to be protected from unreasonable searches and seizures. And Snowden showed to light that the government has been violating the Constitution and violating our rights and our freedoms. These people should be considered heroes. And if we're looking at our Constitution and our rights, they absolutely would be. So the fact that they're not is very strange. And the fact that we've become so brainwashed as a populace inside this matrix that these people who are defending our First Amendment and all of our different amendment rights have been villainized and demonized when our Constitution gives us these rights, and this is a check on the government's power. They're so villainized and so demonized for showing us that we're being abused and our Constitution's being violated is ridiculous. Same thing here with Ross, which Trump recently agreed to. If he's elected, he's going to commute, not pardon, but commute his sentence, right? So he served 11 to 12 years already for a nonviolent crime, which was creating a website for people to buy and sell things. Whether you agree with if that was good or bad, it's not reasonable to sentence a kid who's really in his teens or 20s, early 20s, to a life in prison on the taxpayer dime because he created a website, right? It's ridiculous. So yes, he talks about our Eighth Amendment. Let's move on. U.S. Congressman Tom Emmer says Gary Gensler has been the worst thing to have ever happened to the SEC. He literally violates the mission of the SEC every day. I could not agree more with Tom Emmer's take here, and it's actually very sad because Gensler was one of the few people who were actually educated on the technology he's trying to crush, and he taught classes about it at MIT, and he's now the ultimate hypocrite, going against everything he said only 1 to 2 years ago when he was teaching at MIT. It honestly showcases the level of hypocrisy and corruption when someone sells their soul to Elizabeth Warren or whoever else he's trying to please, right? So I'm going to use this tool here called Perplexity. It's a little extension pop up and say, what is the SEC's mission? And it will show you here. It pops up on my end. I'll read it to you guys. Protect investors, number one. I know we've talked about it before, the 3-part mission. The SEC aims to safeguard investors from fraudulent and manipulative practices in the securities markets. They're going after the good actors like Coinbase and Kraken just ridiculous, right? They're not protecting anybody. They haven't protected anybody. All they're doing is wasting taxpayer money. Instead of having, the FTXs of the world custody customer funds, they've actively prevented the most highly regulated entities and institutions via SAB 121, via their unconstitutional and I'd argue illegal guidance that without following the proper process and procedure, they've basically acted in Congress's behalf and are making things up on the fly to try to crush the industry, right? They made this SAB 121, which effectively made it impossible for any entity, any bank, any actually regulated entity to custody people's assets to help protect investors with a custodialship option, right? So they've done the opposite of protect investors, to Tom Emmer's point here. Secondly, maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets. Again, they haven't been fair, they haven't been orderly, and they haven't been efficient, blocking all of these ETF wrappers for products like Bitcoin ETF that they had to waste taxpayer funds on to go to court, lose in court, waste taxpayer funds, being sanctioned for violating and attacking crypto companies. I mean, just total bullshit. The agency works to ensure that markets operate fairly and efficiently, promoting transparency and integrity. I would argue they've done the absolute complete opposite of that under this administration. And finally, to facilitate capital formation, the SEC facilitates the formation of capital by enabling companies to raise funds through the issuance of securities, thereby supporting economic growth. They've done the complete opposite by blocking all these ETFs. And once we saw when the ETFs were launched, we saw tons of capital form around these ETFs in a totally transparent way for people to operate in the traditional financial system to gain price exposure to these assets. So again, I agree with Emmer completely here. The government has violated and done the complete opposite here. The SEC has done the complete opposite of what their mission is. So thanks for pointing that out, Mr. Emmer. Next up, just in, 33% of U.S. voters say that they will weigh candidates' Bitcoin and crypto views. So the first Bitcoin election, I think this is a big theme to focus on, and we've seen the massive support that's formed around previous President Donald Trump as he's embraced the industry. And it's sad to see that the current administration was shocked by this, and now they're starting to try to potentially reverse course, but we don't really know. The problem is what they've done the past 4 years is unforgivable and completely authoritarian, from Marty Gruenberg and the FDIC to all of the actions of Gary Gensler and the SEC from SAB 21, to all of the phony bullshit that they've done behind the scenes. So I think it's time to vote them out and get a new administration, and we got a clean house. And 33% of U.S. voters, this is an important issue, right? They've actively suppressed and prevented capital formation. They're forcing, developers and talent and companies to go out of the U.S. because of the political climate here, because of the unconstitutional behavior by these career swamp officials. Eric Voorhees, this was a interesting post here. He says, devs writing privacy software labeled terrorists while politicians write cute messages on bombs and literally murder people at scale. Interesting to point out that they're calling, developers who write code terrorists, and this just draws attention. And it's one thing to support Israel, right, and support Israel's rights to exist. It's a completely another thing to, be signing literally bombs that they're throwing into the Gaza Strip. It's sad to see the loss of life that has occurred from both sides of this conflict. You can form your own opinions on that. Ryan Selkis pointing this out, and I have the same feeling, right? Not feeling this guy at all. AGI and its regulation cannot run through Sam Altman. Seen this movie before. This guy, Sam, gives me the same vibes that I got from Sam Bankman-Fried. And here he says, OpenAI's Sam Altman just vowed to donate most of his wealth through Giving Pledge. Genry here has all the stuff that's happened, what's going on with the censorship that you see on, GPT, how they're baking all this propaganda into the GPT-4 and all these different GPTs they're launching. You really see the censorship and the woke machine that's underneath the hood. This guy he just rubs me personally the wrong way. Looking at the thing that happened recently with Scarlett Johansson, where she said she didn't want to have her voice used. He basically just went around her completely and used AI or whatever to form a voice that was very similar. Now they're claiming that this is not what they did, that they've got an actress who did that, but they won't release her identity because they want to protect her privacy. But that just doesn't really hold. It doesn't really hold up. Actors and actresses and people, they want to be well known. They want to be celebrated. They want to be in the public, right? It just doesn't make sense, right? And some of the posts are pretty funny. Sam the bank man, Sam the alt man, simulation confirmed. Someone here says, Genry says, Sam me once, Sam on you. Sam me twice, Sam on me. That's my favorite. So, I'm not saying that, Sam Altman hasn't done tremendously, good things with what he's given to the world with the advancement of AI and computing. But, I'm just a little skeptical here. I have a little skepticism. Autism Capital. Yeah, just a follow up on this. Where have we seen this one before? A 30-year-old crypto billionaire wants to give his fortune away. There he is, Sam Bankman-Fried. OpenAI Sam Altman just vowed to donate most of his wealth through Giving Pledge. These characters are interesting. But, I just have a sixth sense for these types of things. And this guy my bullshit meter just goes through the roof when I hear this guy. Russia and China commodity exporters are settling in US dollar-backed stablecoins. So much for the BRICS currency that never really had legs. So interesting post from Ram. He always kind of hits the nail on the head here. So it looks like Russian firms, a lot of entities are actually still using the stablecoins underneath the hood to settle their transactions, their trade, right? They're using blockchain rails to settle in dollars, which is long-term good for dollars, right? This is good for America. So this was an interesting graph I saw that really like puts things into perspective. The holdings of U.S. Treasuries by country, right? So you look at Japan has tons of U.S. Treasuries, China, the UK, Luxembourg, Canada. You kind of like see all these countries that have U.S. Treasuries. And then you see like right before Norway, we've got fiat-backed stablecoins. So what does that mean? That means USDC and USDT are some of the biggest buyers, probably top 10 to 20 largest purchasers of U.S. government debt in the world, right? So this is without stablecoin legislation. This is without any embracement of the industry of this new buyer for U.S. debt. And this is from DeFi Llama. Imagine if the U.S. government was smart and our congressional people were intelligent and they actually understood this. And I think Paul Ryan recently was talking about this. We should be embracing this. This is fantastic for the dollar. This gets the dollar into everybody's hands all over the world in a permissionless way. There are trade-offs you have to make here, right? Do you want to have the dollar be the future of the world? Do you want it to be the most liquid and continue to be the global reserve currency? Do you want everybody in the world to have access to the dollar? Do you want to have it entwined in every single system that everybody uses as a part of the future? Or do you want to violate the Constitution and try to monitor everybody's little action and be an authoritarian kingdom where we treat everybody as a criminal, right? You can't have both. So it's time for the U.S. government to decide. Now, that being said, again, there should be mechanisms that investigators for real criminals, for crimes that are built into the bill that, hey, if you have a warrant, if our intelligence agencies or the FBI or whatever identifies transactions that were being associated with pedophiles, and they were able to track all these people all over the world and launch an investigation with everybody. They did the dirty work. They looked through the blockchain and they found these criminals, and they were able to track them all down and bust them all in the biggest bust in human history, right? For these pedophiles. And that is good police work. That is just because your people's rights make things a little harder for these agencies doesn't mean that we shouldn't have these rights. Being an agent is easy. We're not trading our personal freedoms and rights to make your job easier. We can respect the job that you do, and we can put a mechanism where if you do the dirty work and you do the research and you track these things down, there can be a way to subpoena for the records and freeze funds if you go through the proper channels to do that, right? But we can't just treat everybody as a criminal. This is not sustainable for the world. It's not sustainable for freedom. It's a direct violation. The KYC AML regime and all of these privacy violating things that the government has been doing. This is not compatible with the U.S. Constitution. And it takes us to a very Orwellian place when you extrapolate, which brings me here to this next post, right? So we can either have the Constitution and have freedom and empower people, or we can have what China is having, right? Look at this image, and like they literally know everything about everybody in this image. Look at this facial recognition. I mean, this is so creepy and Orwellian. This is like one of those sci-fi movies. I mean, this is what's happening in China, right? So China, Balaji points this out. China used to have a pragmatic theory of limited government. The mountains are high and the emperor is far away because China is such a vast place. It's hard to, violate everybody's, freedoms all over the world because it's just impossible logistically to rule everywhere. And the state wasn't limited by legality, but by practicality. The mountains are high and the emperor is far away. But now it couldn't be everywhere at once. Now it can. There is dangerous implications for this technology. Eigen Robot says, it is unfortunately probable that AI will cage a large portion of the world in a kind of totalitarian serfdom, the likes of which has never been seen and far beyond the darkest nightmares of Orwell. Very, very creepy. It gives me goosebumps, like just even talking about this. I mean, we have to fight against this. And we have to go back to the Constitution. And America has to be the bastion for freedom and the bastion for personal liberties, right? We have to go back to the Constitution. We have to embrace the Constitution. And we have to peel away all of these things, all these violations of the Constitution. The court system, the judicial system has to hold these branches. If the legislative branch passes a law that is unconstitutional, the judicial system has to step in and say, this is unconstitutional, right? All this KYC, AML, treating everybody as a criminal, all this stuff has to be stripped away. It's not viable for the next century here. It's really not, because these tools, these AI tools, are going to make this level of censorship, this level of authoritarianism much easier, and it's going to propagate itself. So we have to have checks on these things. Here's another quote. Nobody uses Bitcoin. Meanwhile, 4.2 million traded in the last minute over Bitcoin. I love it, right? So you can just see all these funds of flows being transacted. And there's just, if you go to, I think bitfeed.live, it shows you just a beautiful chart of, you can see transactions just falling, people using the network. So fascinating. Finally today, Gemini Earn users will receive 100% of their crypto back in kind. This is fantastic. 32% recovery from when withdrawals were halted. Big W. And then here Kevin Yedid Batan says, users still probably don't appreciate how big this win is. If you were an FTX creditor, you got dollarized at the bottom of the market. If you were a Gemini Earn creditor, Gemini fought against dollarization in court, won, and is now paying Gemini Earn users in kind at near all-time highs. So good work, Gemini. Cameron and Tyler, you guys did a good job with this whole situation. So fantastic. This is really how it should be. It's sad to see these other, FTX bankruptcy estate and the BlockFi bankruptcy estate. You're putting all this media press out, and you guys have collected billions of dollars in fees, but you guys really kind of didn't do justice for the little guy. You locked in the losses at the bottom. Instead of giving them back their actual assets, you're giving them back a dollarized, version of that, which was at the bottom. You locked in. It's just not fair. It's not reasonable. And bankruptcy laws need to be updated to do exactly what Gemini did here, right? To do exactly what Gemini did here for his customers. So, I called out Gemini the other day for their very Orwellian privacy letter they sent somebody, but let's give them credit where credit is due on this. It's nice to see this, right? But that's all I got for you guys today. Stay safe, stay blessed, and never stop learning. Keep an open mind. Thanks for listening.